All right. Hi, welcome to the Rutgers semi-annual faculty reading. This has been a very strange semester, and hopefully this reading will be just as strange, but in a better way. I'm looking forward to hearing everyone. So we have 6 people reading today. First up is Paul Blaney, who's been teaching in the basement for at least a dozen years. He's primarily a short fiction writer, though I know he's written novels too, but he's going to read some poetry. So please welcome Paul.
Thank you, Joanna. Yeah, I'm masquerading as a poet tonight. The first 2 I'm going to read are sort of spiritual. I'm getting to that age in my 50s where things turn a little spiritual. So the first one's a very short one. It was kind of inspired by sea swimming. Last time I was in Ireland, it seemed like old middle-aged people were going to the ocean in any kind of weather and immersing themselves and having a strange and exhilarating experience. So I wrote this one, Absolution, about that. Very short, this. Absolution. Render yourself unto water, deliver your aching limbs and troubled mind to river, rippled lake, or better yet, the ceaseless sea, which even in its calmest moods lies never still. Go on now, skip down the pebble strand, trip through folding waves, and mesmerized by that immensity, set your earthly cares afloat. Imagine if it helps a basket on ocean's shifting bosom. Forge deeper then, out to where feet find no more floor. There, buoyed, anchors slipped, and face tipped to heaven, ride the swell. Okay, another spooky spiritual one. This is a bit longer. This is called A Light in the Sky, and was inspired by a light I saw in the sky in New Brunswick one night. A light in the sky, unwinking, not an aeroplane, too high surely to shine atop any of the buildings hereabouts. Neither did it seem a star, unexplained, curious, hung up there alone, a mystery of sorts, though not one that detained me, not in that drizzle. Only it returned to me later as I pasted, brushed my teeth, and I felt the urge to step out back and see was it still there, and it was, though the rain had given over, and this confirmation gave me a certain comfort, you could almost call it solace. Not you understand that I made anything special of it, that light that hung up there like a button. Simply I thought it a kindly kind of light, and that we could do with more like it to light the nights round here. As I stood there gazing up, a train clanked by across the river. It was late, and I suddenly thought of a man standing by the tracks. I knew just the lonely spot. Some desperate soul, resolved, who knows why, to put himself in the path of a roaring, headlong express. Thought, that is, of how, perhaps, he might, lifting his troubled gaze, who knows why, to meet that strange soft light, change his mind, this one night at least, shiver, turn up his collar, go back into bed. Two more. Well, what else have I got here for you? Let's see. I'll read Gloria Ridge. This is a bit sort of global warming-y. Cruising altitude, in fact, I've called it, it seems. I don't know if I like that. Cruising altitude. Gloria Ridge, Corner Seamounts, Porcupine Plateau, Bermuda Rise, might all be names of retirement communities, subdivisions, golf courses, sandy offshore islands on a map of Florida, but are in fact features of the Atlantic seabed seen on my back of seat screen where I gauged the gradual progress of flight AA61, London Heathrow to Miami International. Now and then I glance sidelong out the window, down past the wing, between whale-big clouds, at the ocean's wrinkled surface, and I think it's just as well these particular names were not applied to some portion of our low-lying sunshine state. For might it not have tempted fate to name dry land topography after an underwater plateau or ridge? It might in fact have provoked all-out Atlantic inundation, swamping coastal areas, chiseling novel inlets, carving a new outline for America's southeast seaboard. Not to say there's not a certain pleasure to be had sitting idle here above it all, from pondering the would-be irony, conjuring up visions too of righteous tidal devastation. Beaches, strip malls, highways, diners, drowned to a silence wherein schools of bright-bellied fish flash and shimmy between palm trees and through parking lots, glide under carports, past flooded showrooms, cruise down submerged Ocean Ave, heedless of the stubborn, sunken stoplights blinking red to green, green to orange to red. And the last one's a silly one. I thought I should, after getting a bit spiritual. So this comes from, I don't know if anybody else has this experience where I'm a keen reader of those astrophysics, astronomy articles when they try to explain some extraordinary thing that's happening in the universe and how it changes everything. And I, with the best will in the world, completely fail to understand what they're talking about. So this is a bit silly. It's called This Changes Everything. A scientific breakthrough, new window on the universe. Gravitational waves, like radio waves or Mexican, ripples in space-time's fabric, confirmation of whose existence, after 2 centuries speculation, and as predicted by Einstein, right again, Albert, is hailed as a landmark. How did they confirm it, those far-sighted equationers, practical dreamers, with theories that promise to explain all? They simply built a highly complex hypersensitive detector and tuned in on the collision, a billion light years hence, of 2 black holes. That's to say they listened for 20 milliseconds as the 2 giants, one 35 times the mass of our sun, the other somewhat smaller, spiraled around one another, 250 times a second, a pair of dusky dancers before the final collision and dark merger. So you see, that's how they picked them up, these long posited but hitherto unconfirmed gravitational waves. This is an extraordinary milestone for physics, Alberto Vecchio of Birmingham University assured reporters, more so even than Higgs boson. I can't tell you how transformational this is. He certainly couldn't tell me. That's it, thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to read next. I think I'll read some new poems and then I'll read one poem from the new book. So I'm working on a collection of, I'm JOANNA FUHRMAN. I guess you can tell my name's on the screen. Yeah, so I'm working on this collection of poems about the internet. They're all prose poems. So I'll read a couple of those and then I'll read some other things. All right. This one is called These 6 Emojis Explain Your Life Right Now. I know how to wrap myself in other people's mishigas. Wait, you know what? Before I do that, I realized I probably should make someone else a co-host before I start reading, because just in case like somebody is in the waiting room. Does anybody want to volunteer to be a cook? Okay, let me do that. Sorry, I should have thought of that. I already like had to, somebody was in the, I think somebody was trying to Zoom bomb us, so I already had to deal with that. So just be aware. If they start to like try to unmute themselves. It might be somebody trying to Zoom bomb, so you might want to remove them. Okay. I mean, I might be paranoid, but wait, Amy, can you tell? Yeah, you're co-host. All right, now I'll read my poem. Sorry. All right. So yeah, these 6 emojis explain your life right now. I know how to wrap myself in other people's mishigas. All morning, I read about the woman from Louisiana who can't stop her son from hiding under the bed, a man in South Korea learning to fish in a hotel bathtub, a child across town who swallowed a whole marshmallow shaped like the Guggenheim. I take screenshots of these strangers' problems and blend them into a banana kale smoothie, drink it from a wine glass with my naked ass deeply sunk in a silk pillow. Afterwards, my body is a pink cloud with winged sneakers. I hover above the data, rain down gossip on other people's pain. This is a kind of freedom, but also what? A kind of tragic happiness like that cowboy who thinks he can lasso transcendence and tie it to his belt buckle. Or like that photo of the lake on fire your student posted as their grinder pic, or at least claimed he did. Like everything else, you'll never actually know. So this next one, most of them are sort of relatively short, but this one's a little longer. And today, if you don't know, is Jane Fonda's birthday. So that's how I decided to read this poem. It's called This Cat Video Will Change Your Life. At the 3-minute and 38-second mark, the kitten transforms into 1984 Jane Fonda. She lifts her knee and behind her skinny thigh, Ronald Reagan's 2-dimensional face rotates on the legs of a plastic wind-up toy. The distance between then and now is unsealed. A slightly shinier 1971 Jane Fonda, what was once called a living reproduction, uses her placard to swat flies, and a 21st century Jane coiffed in a tweed Chanel blazer rolls her eyes. For a moment, all 3 women are one. For a moment, one Jane holds the other Janes in her palm. A single go-go boot spouts wings. The toaster sticks out its tongue. All 3 Janes wear similar smiles in different shades of watermelon pink. All 3 Janes hold hands like Matisse's dancing ladies, sing in a language only the future will understand. In the spaces between the women, reality undulates and flickers. It takes the edges off the objects and replaces them with hums. It skinny dips in static. It tells you if you want to be believed, choose one or the other. Are you the good Jane or the bad? For $1.02, you can try on a Jane wig and be transformed into clamor. For 50 cents, you can throw a canned peach at the Jane of your choice. In Barbarella, all 3 Janes have sex with a frog who looks like the reader of this poem, but he is not the reader of this poem. There is no reader of this poem. The reader of this poem has been replaced with a hangry cell phone. The cell phone is now a vista overlooking a field of werewolves, a river of digital squawks. If you look closely at this space, you will see what will in the future be called the internet. A baby ghost in diapers licking the circumference between one realm and the next. If he leaves behind traces of his DNA, will a future forensic team sing its praises? Will he get credit for some crime none of us knew was taking place? When the internet is pristine, like a basketball suspended in an all-white gallery, you can feel each organ in your body floating solidly in place. It feels like being made of marble. When the internet is chaotic, like one Jane Fonda on 2 motorbikes, your limbs feel like you are swimming in an ocean of noise. If anybody believes this, please sign them up for my new multi-level marketing company selling chocolate-covered merman figurines. If nobody believes this, please sign them up for my newsletter about my Rottweiler Scout. Your childhood hovers like a basketball in a lime green jello mold. Your childhood is both the lime green jello mold and the stainless steel ball hovering within the beautiful shine. At this moment, the internet is born, looking right at the lens of the audience in the next century. When Jane Fonda was an infant, her teeth cut through time. This action created a forest, an electric river dividing the spaces between languages. It created the birth of the internet as well as its eventual destruction. No one is at fault for wanting to stay in this particular everywhere, for enjoying the cleansing mess of it, for trying to swim in an ocean of lime green jello. Who wouldn't enjoy the way language dissolves into sugar? Who wouldn't want to feel someone else's pulse within your skin, to be declared an official child, an offspring of panic and glass? So I'm going to read, I think I won't read the new poem. I'll just read a couple more. I mean, I won't read the old poem. I'll just read a couple more new poems. Last week I was in LA, so I wrote a walking poem about LA. It's called Three-Eyed Map of LA. Can one roam in a city without sidewalks? Or a city where if there are sidewalks, one has to walk in the middle of the street because there's only room on them for the possessions of the unhoused? I'm thankful for dogs and the way they force even the worshipers of cars to tie up their shoes and strut. I keep expecting to see Philip Marlowe around every corner, not Humphrey Bogart, but Elliot Gould's Hound Dog-Eyed One in Altman's The Long Goodbye. I remember him trekking through the headlight-lit hills at 11 p.m. to buy cat food and brownie mix for the young nudist yoga practitioners across the courtyard. Why are there so few cacti in movies about LA? On a walk through Silver Lake, I see succulents in every shape and shade of green, 12-foot cacti that look like they jumbled out of a Looney Tunes desert, ones that resemble squiggly-haired aloe plants or sage green phalluses with tongues sticking out like the Rolling Stones logo. I pass bushes full of drooping birds of paradise, a fat rabbit in a cage, orange trees with oversized green globes. I snap a picture of a discarded terrarium with a little sand at the bottom and a limestone Mayan lintel behind the glass. It's funny that the verb is still snap, since now almost all of our photographs are created by our silent phones. You can't buy coffee on this block unless your phone has an app to order it, but you can go to 7-Eleven and buy a 4-ounce chia pudding for $7.50. You can also walk up a few hills and buy an espresso from a truck by the reservoir where "Say Their Names" is written in strips of white fabric attached to the wire fence. The names of the dead are there too, but the letters within the names are distorted by weather and time. At the farmer's market on Sunset Boulevard, a woman from Brooklyn sells linen jumpsuits, the kind the blonde, middle-aged ex-hippie heiress wears on my favorite LA-based Netflix show. Across the way, a baker brags that her high-protein, gluten-free naan solves all constipation problems. Does she think I look constipated? A woman in a lavender hijab selling hipster baseball caps offers to charge my phone for me. She borrows a generator from the crystal necklace vendor. We talk about cheap airfare. I suggest she look for hotel deals in Jersey City or Newark, somewhere near the path, if she wants to visit New York. Okay, so I'll just end with this. It's called Happiness. Cuteness and pain are the only language the dying understand, but still I want my mom's advice on eyeglass frames. I know better. Instead of sending the pictures of the frames, I sent her a photo of our cat in a cardboard box, a video of a baby goat licking a duckling, and a gif of a red-headed toddler, lipstick zigzagging across her cheeks, explaining the purpose of makeup as if she were an expert in a YouTube tutorial. I don't know if Mom sees any of these texts. Months after she dies, I'm surprised to find myself happy. Reading a book on a towel in the sand, I feel the sun hitting parts of my body I forgot were alive. Still each night, my mom returns, standing by the door of a long electric blue car, sun setting or rising behind her. I stand and wave from the other side of a vast, manicured lawn. Later, Bob and I will eat dumplings in the moonlight, make jokes about a secret we overheard a stranger say to his friend on the bus. I'll laugh so hard the waiter will walk over to ask if everything is okay. Yes, everything is okay, I'll say. Everything is okay. Thanks. And next up is Lindsay Haber. She teaches Intro to Creative Writing and Fiction for us. Her work has appeared in McSweeney's, Glimmer Train, The Normal School, Booth, and elsewhere. Please welcome Lindsay.
Hi. I just love your poetry so much. All right, so I'm going to be reading a story I had published by one of my friends. Oh my gosh, I'm jumbling this already. From my MFA, they started this magazine called Another House, and I think they are going to try and launch a second issue. But it's a really cool magazine because every story is a room in the house. Yeah, they were just, it was all of our obscure stories that just kept getting rejected. So they were just like, we're going to start another house. And then that's how it came to be. So if any writers are watching this, Another House issue 2, definitely submit your work. It's a really beautiful magazine. And my story is in the bedroom. And it is, I'll just show the image, but it's called Oki. And I'm just going to read the beginning. It's a really long story, so I'm going to read an abridged version of the beginning. So if you want to find out what happens, you can. They have an online version and a print version. So yeah, okay. Annette watches her husband eat the last bites of his chili cheese dog. She's leaning against a tree, and he is sitting at a picnic table in front of the tiki hut, one of the 2 food stands at the zoo. Their son is on the playground, and Annette knows he will be occupied by the metal slide for as long as they allow it. A piece of congealed beef sticks to the skin below her husband's bottom lip, and Annette watches in disgust as his tongue curls out from the side of his mouth and searches for the last chunk of chili. Jim has always been a sloppy eater. He's always picked at the meal before she's ready to serve him, always used his grubby hands when he's too lazy for utensils, always revealed what he's eaten through the stains on his clothing. He's always been a tidy person and a sloppy eater. Annette knew this when she married him, but it didn't start repulsing her until they stopped having sex. Annette watches her son climb the steps to the slide again. She walks over to her husband. "Can I have a 10? Decided I'm hungry," she says. And though he won't say it, she will know he is judging her. "Heat is making me dizzy," she'll explain. "And if I don't eat dinner tonight, it's not so." She'll stop, annoyed she has to explain herself. Annette eats the chicken tenders and fries too fast to enjoy, a punishment for her weakness. She watches Jim watching their son. His back is arched and his hands rest against his gut. She hates him for his firm little beer belly. Even when he sticks his stomach out, he doesn't look fat. He eats worse than she does, or at least as badly. And he wasn't the one who had to carry their child, feed their son from the inside out. Lucky son of a bitch will never know what it's like. "Let's ask him what he wants to see first," Jim says, as Annette tosses the cardboard tray in the recycling bin. They approach their son, bony and red-headed. He preferred slides to ice cream. He prefers slides to anything, and he's never in the mood to eat. "Hey, bud, one more time, okay?" Jim says. And though Mason agrees in the moment, after he goes down once, he fights for 3 more times and wins. "But honey, we came to the zoo to see the animals. You can go down slides anytime," Annette says as her son whines for a 5th ride. She threatens to take away his teddy, the only thing that can be waged against the slide, depending on the mood he's in. "Why does it matter? Can't we just let him do what makes him happy?" Jim asks. And though Mason is only 3 and is far more focused on the slide than anything they are saying to him, Annette feels betrayed, like her husband is buying favoritism, like he is making sure that when he is ready to leave her, the boy will follow. "Fine, you 2 stay here. I'll see the animals myself," she says. It wasn't always like this. During the first few years of their relationship, Jim would go home for his lunch break. She would be standing in the kitchen, in the bedroom, in the garden. He would embrace her from behind, press his body against hers. Sometimes he would rip her clothes off, greedy hands with no concept of patience. Other times he would undress her 1 inch of fabric at a time, slowly, slowly, so it would last as long as possible. There was even a time in the parking garage of his office building. Anyone could have seen them pinned between the concrete wall and his infinity. Anyone. It wasn't enough to stop him. Annette gained the weight over time, but it felt like it happened all at once. Even as a girl, she was never thin like Mason. She had always been thick, but once she had aged past the years of crippling self-consciousness, somewhere around 24, she learned that lots of men liked thickness, and she grew to appreciate her triple D breasts and the waning gap between her thighs. She liked the way her butt stuck out like an orb detached from her body, liked the idea that the right man would have something to hold on to. She met Jim at jury duty, a trial for a bagel shop owner who was accused of evading taxes. During the first lunch break, she and Jim went for a bite at Lucy's Luncheonette. Over coffee and omelets, they realized they were just different enough to kind of understand each other. Jim wasn't like other men Annette had dated. He had a subtleness about him she found intriguing. He was quiet in his strength, understated in his masculinity. He was the type of man you'd assumed filed paperwork for the company before learning he was the vice president, the type who would send roses but never expect praise for them. His humble affection sparked something in Annette that a typical man couldn't. The careful notes on the refrigerator, the way he didn't stress about traffic, his compulsive tidiness, even the sloppy eating, all of this led to her initial love for him. Annette leaves the children's section of the zoo and follows a sign pointing toward the African savanna. She ends up at the giraffe exhibit, where she decides the name giraffe exhibit is misleading. What it should really say is sad giraffe trapped in pen. She leans against the chain link fence and watches the tall animal walk in circles in an enclosure far too small for the length of its long legs, the space between its front and hind hooves. Annette would love to see this guy outside the confines of the cell in Dorchester, would love to see it as a truer version of itself. She watches it skirt the perimeter of the fence, munching on leaves and ending up where it started. The first few pounds were gained on their honeymoon. Hawaiian breakfast spreads and late night pig roasts. She said she would join a gym when they got back, mentioned hearing a good thing about jazzercise, but each time she brought up the weight, Jim would place his index finger between her eyebrows. He'd let it slide down the curve of her face until it rested on her lips. Shh, he would say, you're perfect the way you are. And she would believe him. Those initial 5 from the honeymoon turned into 10 pounds and 10 more after that. Then the year they began trying to conceive, Annette's mother died from a brain hemorrhage. Annette and her mother were not particularly close. For much of her childhood, Annette felt like she was the parent and her mother the child. Her mother was needy and inattentive to other people's lives and circumstance. It took her 2 years to remember Jim's name, and she never asked about their lives. Still, the death weighed heavily on Annette. It led to an immediate loss of 20 pounds in the weeks following the funeral, but an eventual gain of 50 before the year was over. When she became pregnant with Mason, the cravings took control. Dominoes at 3 a.m., Indian buffets every Sunday, funnel cakes and fried Oreos and fried cheesecake the summer before he was born. The grief from her mother's sudden death and the fear for the child living inside her left a hunger that could not be quelled. Ramen noodles, peanut butter pie, cheese fries, always cheese fries. By the time Mason was a month old, Annette had gained another 60 pounds. Over the next 4 years, Annette continued to gain weight, but she stopped weighing herself. Eating in excess had become such a part of her life that she came to expect the bloated feeling, welcome it even. She'd eat her son's leftovers, swallow the untouched sandwiches from his lunchbox, wake up in the middle of the night to binge on graham crackers and fruit snacks. She'd complain to Jim, tell him she wanted to stop eating but couldn't. He would say he didn't care, say she would always be his beautiful wife, but still he would not have sex with her. The truth was, Annette found power in each pound she gained, strength in the way she took up space. A part of her was tempted to see how big she could get and didn't care about pleasing Jim. She was constantly torn between saving her marriage and loving her beautifully round body. Annette walks into the building labeled Tropical Forest. After seeing the giraffe, she is quite certain she doesn't care for zoos, but she isn't ready to go back to Mason and Jim. She feels like someone should see the animals they paid to see. She winds up at the gorilla exhibit. She sees the outline of one of the gorillas lounging close to the glass. He is lying down with his arms folded behind his head and his legs crossed. He resembles one of the professionals Annette sometimes sees using their lunch break to lounge in the public garden. He absorbs the light from the heat lamp. He is pondering life. There is a raggedy stuffed elephant a few feet from him, but he is too wise for a toy like that. Annette searches the face of the old gorilla and forces their eyes to lock. There is one moment, an instant of recognition, an instant of peace, before he jumps to his feet and pounds the glass. The pounding startles Annette. Her feet don't move. Her mind cannot will her body to run, but each time the gorilla slams the glass, her whole torso jolts. She stares into the animal's black eyes, his wild, wet eyes. She is shocked, unable to make a decision. A moment before, it was serene, the impossible recognition, the awareness between them. Now the gorilla is frightening her, inciting panic, making his dominance known. Ma'am, don't worry about Oki. The sound of a human voice breaks the strange transfixion and causes Annette to jump. She turns her head and looks at the young zookeeper, notices the shadow of stubble on his jaw, the broadness of his shoulders, his sharp, capable features, the thin film of dirt covering his face. It just means he, likes you. He looks her up and down. Each male gorilla has a type, and you're just the type of woman to get Oki going. The zookeeper laughs to himself, but we don't like to get him too riled up, so let me show you out. Let's give old Oki here a rest. Annette can pinpoint the moment when Jim lost interest. It was a Thursday night, and Mason was at her mother's house. There was nothing overt about the gesture. She wasn't wearing lingerie, didn't fill the room with dozens of scented candles. They just finished watching a documentary about the history of paper products in the US, and she leaned over to him, moved her hand along the hem of his briefs, began kissing the pale skin of his neck. He sprang from the bed before anything could happen, walked around the room, and placed his mouth on her forehead, a cold, friend-like kiss, devoid of tension. Think I'm gonna go for a run, hon, Jim said. He was out the door before she could process what had happened. Now it had been 2 whole years, and other than quickies with the lights off, they hadn't had sex since. He never took his time with her body anymore. He no longer came up from behind her on his lunch break when she was in the bedroom, in the kitchen, in the garden. In fact, he requested lunch to go now. Roast beef with cheddar and sour cream chips. He'd eat it at work every day, every single day. The same lunch, the same disappointment. Mommy, slide one more time, please, please. When Annette sees her son, he runs up and flings himself around her thighs. His voice is an octave below a tantrum. She is too shaken up to prevent him from sliding again, so she tells him he can go once more, then straight to the car. Jim approaches her. I thought you were trying to set limits and agree on these things. That's why I told him he couldn't go again, he says. I don't like being the bad guy, Annette. You know I don't have a problem with this slide obsession like you do. On any other day, a comment like this from her husband would incite all of Annette's defenses. On any other day, she would respond with the, how can you say that when you went against me before and I'm always the bad parent. But in this moment, on this day, Annette is lost somewhere thinking about Oki's wet eyes. She doesn't have the energy to play who's to blame with her husband. Annette spends the rest of the evening like this, lost somewhere between a dream and reality. She goes through the motions of preparing the macaroni her son will barely touch. She packs his lunchbox for school the next day, irons Jim's shirt, but the whole time she can't break this surreal feeling. The look in Oki's eyes was one of animalistic desire. It's been so long since someone's looked at her like that. Okay, I'll stop there.
Alex, are you ready to go? Or are you still uploading? Oh, you're muted. You're okay, great. So Alex's forthcoming novel, Welcome to White House, is due out next year. His bookmobile, the Rac-On-Tour, a farm truck offshoot of his erstwhile bookshop, the Raconteur, is hitting the, well, maybe it's already hit the road, I think, right? You're
Yeah.
soft opening already.
Yeah.
So check it out if you're in Highland Park, unless you come when he's in, unless you visit while he's in Iceland. But otherwise, when are you at Highland Park Farmers
I'm
Market?
gonna be in Highland Park probably for the next year. So
Oh, okay,
it's
yeah.
become more of an encampment and less of a. So it's just to correct 2 things, Joe. And so it's
Right.
Welcome to White Hart. That's the novel,
Oh,
and because it's hard to sort of distinguish the name differences. So this is the Rac-On-Tour, get it?
Ah.
It's a mobile bookstore, and the bookstore was called the Raconteur. Yeah. So.
Okay.
All right, you ready for me?
Yeah, ready.
Okay. So I grew up in Alabama and around a lot of men who were deer hunters. My stepfather had this shirt, I remember, that had an antlered bear on the front, and it said, beware the beer. And on the back, it said, don't hunt drunk. And when I always like to take the most ridiculous thing I can think of and see if I can turn it into something legit. So I hit upon this idea of this sort of mythic creature, the bear, right? The bear deer. And I wrote this story about it. I wrote the story, it's not something I wrote, it's not brand new, but everything I wrote brand new was around Halloween. And I wanted something that was wintry. So this is definitely set during the cold weather. So this is called The Monarch of Mathan Moor. The Mathan Moor stood as it had for hundreds of years, stupidly tall for these parts, where the wind whined and whistled, pulling at shingles and shakes, at lap siding and clapboard, wrecking anything and everything first floor and above. But still it stood, against all odds, a rearing bear of a building. Even so, it couldn't keep its glass, not at the top, the round window, blown in every winter, boarded now, black wood, the nose, folks called it, the black nose of a great white bear. I want to tell you a story from long ago, about the Mathan Moor, about its owner, Margaret McMathan, about how that great antler set came to hang over the top shelf whiskey. Dusty now, dusty as the bottles no one could afford, the 50-year in fine oak, the rare collection reserve, an inch easy on each shoulder, an inch or more on the tines and spellers. Red deer? No. Roe? No. Sit back, my friends. Sip your sark, your bottle of wolf. Worry your napkin. Twist it, twist it. Press the cap into your palm. Let the crown draw 21 tiny drops of blood. Listen to the winter wind hum, the fire pop its pine, and hear my story. Hear my story and believe. As I say, Margaret McMathan owned the bar, had since her father died, maybe died, writer to say failed to return from a trip to Beer Island. Some said he stayed, that he was drunk and happy, drinking the holes where the suds puddled. Either way, Lady Mac, as she was called, was left to run the place, to handle the men, a job it seemed she was born to do. Lady Mac. You could almost believe it, the lady part, despite the broad shoulders, the arms like legs, the legs like trunks, the trunk big as a bear, in the frill and filigree of her blouse, in the dainty way she cut a twist, the careful way she scraped the foam level with a comb, how she always used a spoon to fetch a cherry, an olive, an onion. No one cared how the foam ran over, whether the twist curled or not, if she fingered the fruit. No one cared, but she did. She cared. And she kept her bar clean, clean as a new pin. But a lady, she was not. Test her, why don't? Call her Mags McBear, why don't? No harm, right? After all, you know you're Gaelic and Mathan means bear. And with her short white hair, that hump of muscle at her shoulders, she looked like one, as much as the old moor itself. One man did, Mags McBear, an old crofter. They saw her hair bramble up, just as they saw his red nose go white with the sudden grasp of what he'd done. Swore too they saw her ears lay flat. Band, yes. 86th, sure. But gone too. His hut boarded up, tight and black as that round window. Dead maybe, or good as, or worse than. But oh, how they loved her. How she let them linger after last call. Enter early with a special knock, shave and a haircut on the wide wood of the door, 2 bits on the thick blistered glass. How she sometimes served them food for free when the haddock or haggis was about to turn. Compliments of the chef, she'd say, which was her. It's awful good, she'd say. And it was. And she was beautiful too, to them. The men who lived in this land where polar bears once roamed. The white froth on the top of her head, as trim as the comb-cut foam. Something is loose in town, something big and wild. They see its rack through the leaded panes, bubbled and wavy though they are, like something underwater, bent and broken, like a stalk of ryegrass in a glass, what the men use as straws. They see the big muscled hump of its white shoulder. A stag? No. Now it's up on its forepaws, webbed, leaning heavily against the casement, against the mutons and glazing bars, the panes cracking like ice under its feet, the sash bars holding only just. They see its black nose, its small, rounded white ears. A polar bear? No, no, it roars, a god-awful sound, tragic, lonely, but mean too. Maybe mean because it's lonely, but lonely for others like it. Not for the men in the Mathan Moor, huddled now under its heaviest table, the one whose legs are carved to look like lions as if waiting out a storm. Hungry for, not lonely for, this mythic man-eater, this fierce Fianna Mathan. Over from Beer Island, the men guess, because the Firth finally froze up for the first time in maybe 500 years. No one believed beers actually lived on Beer Island, just as no one believed Pennywhip would pool up if you dug a well in the sand. Though everyone heard the stories about the fierce bear deer, about the holes filled with barley pop, and every so often some shiner would sail over to see if there was a sand grain of truth, just as Malcolm McMathan had done. 24 empty barrels he had, a siphon hose, a racking cane. They even toasted the thing. The holes doth make man quaff, quaffing doth make man sing, sing doth make man laugh, and laughing doth the great beer bring. But no one believed it. History had it named for Van Beers, the Dutch sailor who discovered it, not for mythic springs, for monstrous mammals. Still, there it was, scavenging the tavern bins for kebabs, smashing into doors, drunk. Drunk because Lady Mac always left out a dog dish of whiskey, a big bowl for Old Barley, the village mutt, Rot and Sheepdog and 5 other breeds easy. His tongue forever spooling, lolling, long as a scarf. He can't hold his liquor, Lady Mac liked to say, meaning tongue and whiskey. Oh, how everyone laughed to see him sway, to see him run sideways, to see him lurch and topple headlong off the quay. Yes, Barley was a funny drunk. Not so the beer, who held it worse than Barley. The beer was angry, and it wanted in. Drawn by the sign, a grizzly head roaring on chains, Mathan spelled on its top teeth, more on its bottom, swinging so hard in the singing Scottish wind, the back of it slapped the eave from which it hung. Drawn too by the rearing whiteness of the building itself. It pawed the moor's big oak door, cast iron studs and long strappy hinges, like the door of a castle, though now shuddering under the weight of the beer, it suddenly seemed as thin as a tent flap. And then it was in. Lady Mac stepped out from behind the bar, which most had seen her do only a few times before, 5, maybe 6 tops. The groan of the gate did the job most nights. If I have to come out there, she'd say, lifting the bar hatch, its hinge unoiled for just that reason, a sound that sent men running without her ever walking round, sure as the cock of a gun. She stood there facing the beer, no bat, no axe handle, no shillelagh, just those thigh-thick arms. She slapped the center of her chest, the skin bare where her blouse scooped, and yelled. She stood there in front of the beer, just as she stood all those days and nights behind the bar, but she seemed taller. Maybe it was their perspective, the men cowering on their heels, some on their bellies, a vole's eye view, vole or snake, down low, looking up. But she seemed to tower, to rear, as if up on her hind legs, like the great beer itself. The men closed their eyes. Those that didn't saw but a blur, a cartoonish whirl of white. They could pick out Lady Mac's big black boots, her cuffed musketeers, her red blouse. Or was that blood? The fight spun faster, white, black, red, yin, yang, blood, faster, faster. You couldn't tell where Mac ended and the beer began. Faster, faster, faster. And then it was over. The bear howling tragically, small seeming, Fianna no more, rabbited into the night. And Lady Mac, yelling again, turned to face the men. In each hand she held high an antler branch, bloody at the burrs, her chest too with its plunging neckline, so red now with blood, so thick with gore, as if to seem ruffled, high-collared. And to them, The men huddled there, still hugging their table legs. She had never been more beautiful, and they had never loved her more. So, she said, dropping the great antlers onto the bar where they tumbled in a series of staggered knocks like an armload of firewood. Who wants a top-up? The branches gleamed on the black band of the bar counter, starry white except where they were red. The counter was slippery tonight, and the men watched as the antlers, drifting on drink spills, slowly slid the length of it, like ice on a river, before arriving with a soft thud at the lip of the raised gate. Suddenly, Lady Mac pivoted from the well, from the speed rail, and went for the top shelf. The years no one could afford, the long necks and wasp waists. A button of red wax on the chest of one, another gold labeled, black and bellied like a tiny stove. They were numbered and signed, and Lady Mac loved them even if they didn't sell. They gave the place class, and she dusted them daily, her turrets and towers, her kingdom of glass. She pulled one down, tall and slope-shouldered, white as boiled bone, as antlers in ice. She set out a dozen cups, bubbling the bottle forward, a capful in each. Just a taste, she said. Not a top-up then, a buyback, a round on the house. As the men came out from under the table, lining up to collect their drinks, they realized how completely and utterly they belonged to her, like subjects to a queen, the monarch of Mathan Moor. They were her men, Lady Mac's men, and truth be told, that's all they ever wanted to be. Thank you.
Okay, next up, LESLIEANN Hobayan is a poet, essayist, and host of the podcast Spiritual Grit, a show at the intersection of spirituality and activism. Her work has appeared in The Rumpus, The Grief Diaries, Lantern Review, the Mom Egg Review, and many, many other places. Please welcome LESLIEANN.
Hello, everyone. Okay, so virtual readings are weird. I'm just going to say that right now. I'm just going to say what we're all thinking. Like this virtual clapping, like I appreciate the visual, but it's still weird. But something we need to adapt to. So I'm just going to read a few poems and we'll see how it goes. A lot of the work that I've been writing lately has a spiritual bent. So Paul, I appreciate your sharing. And I'm gonna read non-spiritual ones first and then one at the end. So this one is called Archipelago. Why is not a useful question at times like these when we think we know the answer, but I will ask anyway. Why am I not writing about the landscape, the lush green, the glacial water, impossible blues? Writing the self-conscious poem is never a good idea, but what the heck? Why am I not writing the poems of rage against the image of a drowned father and his young daughter, or the poems of despair? For I too have daughters, 3 to be exact, and why am I not writing about them? Or about being their mother or mothering or trying to be a mother who has an art practice that is appreciated less than banking? Why am I not writing poems about my fractured, pieced together identity of living in the diaspora in the third culture that no one really understands? And why am I really not writing about being a mother to biracial kids in a world that favors hegemony? Why am I not writing about the arm injury, how it hurts to write? And is that a metaphor for something larger? What messages are stored in my body? Where is my decoder ring? What else am I not saying? My elbow aches, and so the muscles of my forearm overcompensate, but that too is strained because of the elbow, the tendons in that soft pocket where the arm bones meet. And I could look up their medical names, but that would take me off track and away from this poem of self-awareness. Are strained, which then affects the wrist, the shoulder, its front edge pulling, straining, like this poem straining. What am I really writing about? How I want to go to sleep to dream a poem into being, how I want to avoid all the notions that call to me, begging that I write about them. I do not want bad dreams or sad dreams. I just want language that floats to the top like cream like foam on a latte. But it is late and I am blubbering, looking for poetry while looking away from the things that call to me. I am the mother I always wanted but never had. Who am I, though? Who am I really, if I am not the body nor the mind, but something divine? How do I bring together these islands of my life, this archipelago of myself? How to collect the me's, the brown girl, the mama, the daughter, the poet, the yogi, the hip hop dancer, all of it and more. How to gather them up like flowers in my arms. Ooh, I'll just make sound effects for myself. Okay, so there has been a lot of, we'll say, political unrest, to keep it simple. And there was an event that happened in New York City earlier this year where a Filipina woman in her 60s was beaten down in Midtown Manhattan on her way to Mass. And while she was being beaten, there were two men in the building from which the surveillance footage came from who just watched it all happen through the glass doors. And one of the men during the beating went over to the door and closed the door while it was happening. And it's not like he couldn't see it. I mean, the whole thing was glass. So, so I wrote a poem about it because it was a lot. This is called What Kind of Pain? What kind of pain does it take for you to rush up from behind and propel it into the belly of an elder? A Filipina on her way to noon mass, her regular routine to spend time with God, giving thanks, counting blessings. How much pain must you carry in your bones to launch your foot into her head, her face, into her prone body, curled on the concrete sidewalk, washed in spring sun as she grasped her rosary, asking the Lord for deliverance from this wretched earth. Over and over, your foot, a catapult of pain, launching yours into hers, kick after kick after kick. You don't belong here. Whose voice do you hear? What pain must you carry to explode it all into my Lola? Never mind the soulless men who watched, who closed the glass door on her bleeding body, still watching. What pain, what pain. I never want to own pain like that, but it has come closer. Okay, take that off. Okay, so just two more poems. This one is called Theft, and it is about language. I recently came to a memory, because we all have memories that we don't remember. So this one was unearthed, and the memory is that that English is not my first language. So yeah, here we go, Theft. It was stolen before you even knew this word, before you understood the hollow of grief, to be bereft. Sounds that shape your tongue like fluid river, sounds that formed your mouth into a melody you can't quite catch, a wind through your hands. How you wanted to hold this like a tender robin's nest, tend to its incubation, feel its music fill your mouth like peonies in bloom, full and many-petaled. These half words felt like home. You standing in the doorway, cupped hands extended in offering, in receiving. Your throat gathered consonants like bouquets of sampaguita. Your ancestors clucked in the kitchen, waiting for you, until your father stepped out onto the porch, closed the door, and plucked the blossoms from your throat. He planted instead the gravel of American English, a kind of grass seed that beneath its soft surface prickles. Steeped in a grief you do not comprehend, you ask, what else has been taken from you? Okay, I'll snap for myself. All right, and so this last poem, just to kind of bring things up a little bit in the frequency, this is called Cosmos. I love the cosmos. All right, Cosmos. To reach hands skyward, grab fistfuls of stars, to bring down to earth and scatter them over the burning, the dying, the gasping, the crying, to quench the fires, mute the rockets, to still the riot of whales, cast a shimmer of golden dust to recall our star stuff, to join sky and ground, heaven and earth, to know that here is now, always, we are the cosmos. Thank you so much.
And now for our final reader, we have Amy Lawless, who lives in Brooklyn, where I also live. She's the author of the poetry collections My Dead and Broad Axe, both from Octopus, and a chapbook, A Woman Alone. Her poems are recently published or forthcoming from Six Finch, Vita Review, and Bryant Literary Review. And sometimes I run into her in the farmer's market if I'm lucky.
Yes.
But not the Highland Park farmer's market, the Ditmas Park farmers, different park farmers market. You know, that's all writers do is hang out in farmers markets.
We're just trying to get our vegetables.
Yeah.
Joanne and I ran into each other. I was getting my Christmas tree, which I would show to you, but my camera situation isn't mobile. Okay, great. Hi, Joanna. Hi, everybody. I love these readings. So moved and inspired. So my first poem was actually just published in Vita Review, and it's, I guess you could call this a family story. There's this family story where it happened. My great-great-grandfather thought he was trying to shoot snakes, and he shot and killed my great-great-grandmother. So this poem is attempting to be, he thought he was shooting snakes. He committed murder. Okay. Snake wife. When he squared her in the sights, did she slither? Did her tongue diverge? Did she treble that sensational S sound so he mistook her for a snake? Or maybe she moved into the space from which snakes slithered. An honest mistake. Honest as the home they made, honest as the virtues of a serpent. She can get where she's going without walking or swimming or crawling. The will to get from point A to point B on her belly skin is aspirational, metaphysical, and with the right academic article on reptile motion, perfectly explainable. To the naked eye, it's magic to overcome the desire of movement into a, I'll get there on my own. It's annoying how self-sufficient I am. So when I ask for help, bleeding atop my home, mistaken for a snake or whatever this is, I really do need help. And my children will always come running when they hear me play, come running until their old bodies break. My babies will come running until they hear my supernatural sustained solo, a sound elegant as a swan gliding across the lake. And this next poem is, I would say, my realm into a step into the surreal. I am a musician. Suddenly I realized I was a musician. My potential to create the most tear-inducing music on an old love violin washed over me. My body sparkled like gems in the noonday sun. How they said, I want to see her hands as she plays. I rushed over to my husband who was meditating in our bed. He did not want to be disturbed. I am a magician, I said. They want to watch my hands. His eyes remained closed. Then he clapped his hands, and between them emerged a small dove, too small to fit in bed with us, and too bright to really see. Its wings drummed against his hands like someone trying to find keys in a cluttered tote. I moaned behind my closed mouth. I was eating it. He stood and threw the dove out the open window. Its wings flapped silently, rising in the air. Okay, let's do a mood changer here. So this one is, I wouldn't read this to my students, but whatever, they're not here. Oceanic. If you forget, misplace the definition statement of the exact meaning of a word and list, enumerate, itemize all the words, the terms, the expressions you can think, expect, reckon, so no one thinks you're an idiot, moron, lame brain, bozo, asshat, meatball, dipstick, thickhead, dumbass, sap, numbskull, airhead, jerk, nerd, donkey brain, fool, nincompoop. But in so doing, people make their own opinions, reactions, points of view, thoughts, takes, attitudes, impressions, estimations, feelings, assessment, notions, conclusions, clear, comprehensible, unambiguous, plain. Workers build, manufacture, erect, produce, assemble, forge downstairs, and I can't get used to the movement from within the building structure, erection, fabrication, the womb. Oh, the movement is me. When I read the headline, cocaine enters the rivers and eels are out of control on the Weather Channel, I was pleased, happy, contented, over the moon, tickled pink, grateful, thankful, on cloud nine. Someone is finally doing the math, arithmetic, calculations in this awful world, life, reality, presence, journey. I thought, someone is finally finding the drugs in the water life. Someone, even an eel, is finally putting the pinky in the bag, raising the pinky to the nostril and breathing in, really breathing in the air, inhaling, panting, gasping for air, gulping it in. Thought someone is finally finding out that the bag is a big giant ocean, a very large expansive sea. And all we have to do is stick our sick heads into the fucking ocean and everything will be fine, all right, great, fantastic, exciting, colorful, extra worth it because an eel has never been wrong, erring, incorrect, untrue, perverse, astray, except for those terrifying eels with the wide awake doll eyes, peepers, baby blues, who dance, swim, wade around Ursula the Sea Witch in The Little Mermaid. But now that we know they were on coke, blow, nose candy, snow wings, yayo, California cornflakes, white horse the whole time, and well, now it all makes sense, meaning, significance, import, nuance. Thank you. And my last poem will be, thank you, will be Ars Poetica, which is it's sort of like a prose poem. There are no line breaks, so there you go. Ars Poetica. In 6th grade, Mrs. Nurbon assigned us the poem Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost. We had to memorize and recite it aloud, both to each other and as a chorus for the principal, a man who wore these Italian suits we'd only seen in movies. I remember standing there in a chorus of other children saying, "And miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep." It was being forced to promise to commit suicide in front of the whole class. Parochial school, am I right? The next week, we had to write a poem in response to Frost's poem. The drafting process was laborious, but fun. I had the most vivid dream the night before the poem was due. In the dream, a female classmate read and recited her poem to me. I was blown away by how beautiful it was. It was a revelation to me, a reverie. I was probably thinking about the lines, "The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep," in the dream, and heard these words tuned into my classmate's voice channel, my thoughts through her mouth. Dreaming still, I attempted a transcription of her poem, A Winter Chill. The next morning, I was awoken by the nagging jealousy of my classmate and the fear that she was a better poet. That ugly jealousy hurled me forward. I tried to write down what I could remember from the dream of her poem, but I could only recall the mood it set in place. This classmate had not the best family situation, and I knew things I wished I did not. What if she had a closer access to the death drive Frost idealizes? I wasn't thinking that at the time, but I was thinking something rancid. I believe I really became a poet that night I dreamt in words. I returned to class totally fried with unbrushed hair, ready to recreate the poem of my dream. I wrestled with whether my memory was a plagiarism. During lunch, I asked to read my classmate's poem. She handed it to me. It was a poem that stole its end rhyme and its rhyme scheme and end words from Frost. I smiled to her and sighed relief. Poetry was my own rotting apple I'd bobbed for and caught in the night. Thank you.